Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto's hidden mission was to charm enemy women and gather intel, part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Naruto stood at the sink in the Hokage's private bathroom, staring as the blood on his hands colored the water. It flowed trickling into the white sink. He had been tricked. Tricked by a man he thought was looking out for him, but it was all lying. Mizuki just wanted to steal the forbidden scroll of sealing for some guy named Orochimaru, place the blame on him, and of course have the satisfaction of killing him. Oh, and according to the traitorous Chunin teacher, the one truth among all his lies, was that the reason everyone hated him was because he himself was the nine-tailed fox that killed all those people on the night he was born. Iruka said it was not true, that the fox had only been sealed inside of him. But what difference did any of it make? The fox was still alive, and it was a part of him somehow. And everyone, all the adults anyway, knew about it and left him ignorant. Like it was a huge inside joke. Just a sick joke. Naruto just kept looking at his hands as he held them, not moving, under the cold water. They were starting to get numb. He was so engrossed that he didn't hear the door open or the sound of heels clicking on the tiled floor. You're not going to get any of it off just standing there. Naruto-kun, slender rich-colored hands, with well-kept manicured nails, took his under the running water. The boy jumped out his of skin and ripped violently away, quickly backing away until he slammed his back against the opposite wall. Next to the sink was the Hokage's assistant and secretary. She was stunningly beautiful with silvery white hair done in an attractively messy bun with some bangs framing her face and wore a simple gray jacket, white button-up blouse with a black ribbon pinned across itself as a tie, and a pencil skirt matching the jacket with black heels. The woman had dark skin, much darker than Naruto had ever seen before. He had asked her why her skin was like that when he was much younger. He was too innocent to see that his question might be offensive. She simply smiled and told him she was just born outside of the village. The older, but still very young-looking, woman was always so kind to him, and always led him in the office whenever he wanted to see the old man or kept him company herself when the Hokage was too busy. The woman stared at the young boy. He had a look of pure terror, like she was going to try to kill him on the spot. Probably because that was the exact case just an hour ago, she reasoned thoughtfully. I need to show him that he is safe, or he may never trust anyone again. She slowly stepped toward him. Naruto-kun, you're all right, I'm not going to hurt you, she started. He didn't budge and kept staring at her in fear. It honestly broke her heart and hurt her that he would even think she was a threat. She had always tried to show she was at the very least his friend because the poor boy pretty much had none. It's me, Naruto-kun, you know me, Mabui Oba. You are safe now. He looked at her for a moment longer and slumped a little with his head down. But are you safe? He whispered, almost too low for her to catch it. She however did, and his ridiculous statement shocked her. Naruto, why would you ever? She stopped mid-sentence, realizing what he meant. Right, all that happened, she thought sadly. She was in front of him and awkwardly kneeled down in her tight skirt, trying not to show him something that he most likely was not ready to see. She lifted his chin and looked straight into his blue eyes that were starting to pool with tears. Don't be silly. There is nothing dangerous in this room. Not in my eyes. He was a little too old for her to be treating him like a fragile toddler, but she was a mother and she couldn't fight against her maternal instincts when a child needed her. Besides, this wasn't the first time. He wouldn't remember, but they were much closer than he realized. She saw him relax and weakly nod his head, obviously still too much in shock to give a proper thank you. She stood up and took his shoulder, guiding him back to the sink. Let's try this again, and this time with soap and hot water, young man, she playfully scolded, which thankfully earned a small smile from the blond boy. You should take a shower also, and I'll go get you something to change into so you don't have to walk around covered in all that. His favorite orange and blue suit had a big spray of blood on the chest and arms. It looked like something from a slasher film and was most likely ruined. She went to work scrubbing the now dried blood off of his hands and face. When she was done, she patted his head, caressing the scars shaped like whiskers on his cheek. She learned rubbing them made him relax when he was younger. It was horrible how he got them. Are you going to be okay? Mabui asked. She was worried that he had yet to really process what happened earlier, so she still worried that he might break down again. He gave his best grin. Mabui could easily see through it as the mask he always put on, but she smiled back. His ability to put on a brave face was admirable, if a bit concerning that he was repressing his pain, but it relived her to see he was still himself. To her, Naruto Uzumaki was truly a remarkable boy, able to face the pain every day so bravely. She should tell her husband, he would no doubt be as proud as she is. The Hokage's secretary then left the restroom to get his new clothes. Since it was late and all the shops were closed, she would have to get something from the Anbu quartermaster office secretly tucked away in the basement. It was only there for the four-man squad that guarded the Hokage at all times. The real warehouse was in the Anbu headquarters, and that would take forever. But it will suffice, and Mabui already had in mind on what to get, but she would ask a friend who was more familiar with the quartermaster's stock. She'll have a lot of fun with this, and I'm sure she can convince Mazu to hand over the cool stuff, she thought with a satisfied nod. Elsewhere in the tower, the Hokage was in his office with Iruka, and both men were doing their best to calm their nerves. While Hiruzen was calming his nerves, Iruka was trying to keep the pain of his various wounds at bay. They did what most shinobi did in both situations. They drank. Both men were taking slow and steady gulps of sake in wooden masu boxes without the shot glasses. The smaller porcelain chokos were just not enough for a night like tonight. So, what now? Iruka finally asked his leader, looking into his drink before taking another gulp. He was more of a beer guy, but that would cut it this time. This whole thing was a complete mess and he blamed himself. He should have known, or at least paid closer attention to Naruto. He had a lot of regrets about the boy. He didn't hate him, nor was he anxious around him anymore. But that came with its own problems. He knew how Naruto saw him, and he was aware of his own feelings, but he couldn't act on them. He was Naruto's teacher, not his father. He had to keep a professional distance. Sure, he blurred the lines a bit, like take him out to ramen, but that was paltry compared to what he could have done for the boy. What he should have done. Iruka knew there was more to it than just poor attention span. Naruto should have been diagnosed with a slew of disorders that would have given Iruka the necessary rights as a teacher to give the blonde more attention when he struggled with his studies. And Naruto for certain had a too much chakra to the point that it could have qualified him for special circumstance and given him a handicap. Iruka had felt it many times. He wouldn't even be trying and would lose control of his chakra. From those times, and how he had chakra control issues for basic clones and illusions, the boy had to have immense reserves to the point of obscene. And that's not counting him being a Jinchuriki. Iruka knew he could have done better, done more. Naruto was not stupid like people thought. He just had a different way of thinking, like how Iruka was more comfortable with basics and test-proven theory or examples from history. But many times Iruka would find himself stunned when Naruto would let his mask slip and he saw the boy's insight and wisdom during their talks at the ramen stand. It was brief and hidden, but it was there if you paid attention. Iruka was pretty sure now that if Naruto had a chance, he does now that he is an official shinobi, that his unique perspective would turn the ninja world on its head. But right now, they had to make sure that this incident is covered up, or else Naruto may have to face serious opposition. The 80-year-old Hokage sighed after taking a gulp of his own sake. First, damage control. We need to make sure that this incident doesn't get out. If anti-demon supporters found out, they'll have a field day. So we'll need to keep the fact that Naruto failed his exam a secret, and that Mizuki did this all on his own and was executed when caught. He said resolutely. The teacher shook his head after taking another sip. That will be difficult, he said. When he failed, the whole class knew from the look on his face as he left my office and started making fun of him. He ran right out of the room after that. Iruka sighed. The Hokage sighed too and started rubbing the bridge of his nose. The booze had not yet helped with his building headache. That will indeed make things harder, he said and took another gulp. But the most important thing is we need to make sure that young Naruto is alright. I can't imagine what he is feeling right now, and we need to make sure he stays calm, the older man said. He trusted and loved the boy he saw as another grandchild, but he was still the Hokage, and had to think about Naruto's seal. Suna was proof enough of what happens when you have a mentally unstable Jinchuriki on your hands. He's terrified, a feminine voice answered. Both men looked to the door, Iruka with some difficulty because he was sitting in an armchair facing the Hokage. They saw the Hokage's assistant walk in. Mabui-chan, how is he? The older man asked, soft but ragged. He had made plenty of mistakes as Hokage, thankful most weren't the end of the village. But still, there was a few he could never forgive himself for. Mabui walked over to the liquor cabinet meant for visitors like dignitaries and took out a regular shot glass. She then filled it from the bottle sitting on the desk and one swift motion gulped down the burning liquid. She hissed as she swallowed. She really wasn't a drinker and only went out rarely with girlfriends, but seeing a child the same age as your daughter acting like his world was ending tended to grate on a mother's heart. Especially since she pretty much already cared for him like he was her own. She leaned on the desk, sitting against the edge, next to her boss and poured herself another shot. Like I said, he's scared shitless, she finally responded. Both men knew the woman wasn't much for cursing, and tended to be the prim and proper type, so they reasoned that what they were seeing was the former kunoichi and not the dignified secretary to the Hokage. She gulped her drink and exhaled and then continued talking. It hurts seeing him like that. For a full minute he kept looking at me like I was going to pull out a kunai. He will need to be given some time before you decide anything else. He was always a strong boy, but he'll need therapy after this. She finished and took one last shot before putting her choco down, showing she was done with the sake, at least for now. Mabui looked at her boss. With your permission, Hokage-sama, I would like some funds to get Naruto-kun some new clothes. I am more than willing to pay out of pocket. But I feel, that this office owes him the best we can buy. She said. I'm way ahead of Mabui-chan. In fact, I authorize for you to see. Sandame trailed off, sensing a familiar presence outside the door. Just then the door opened and walked in the one man none of the occupants wanted to see, especially tonight. He wasn't very tall but not short either. He had spiky dark brown hair, farmer tan skin, and had a distinctive X-shaped scar on his chin. He wore dark blue over-robes and a white kimono. One of his arms was held in the over-robe like a sling. He had bandages over his right eye and hands. There was a thunk as he walked with a cane. It was Danzo Shimura, the old war hawk himself. I hope I'm not interrupting Hiruzen. The bandaged man asked. Hiruzen glared at his old rival. The man had a habit of being perfectly on time for things no one wanted him involved in, but Hiruzen knew how to play his advisor and old friend's game. Well, we were relaxing for a bit. I'm sure you've heard. It has been a trying night. The Hokage spoke as casually as possible, but inside he was completely on guard. Danzo, if you are going to try to use tonight to get your ugly mitts on that poor boy again. Hiruzen was tired of this back and forth, trying to keep his old colleague from turning Naruto into his own personal weapon. Mabui had been working for her boss for years, ever since she came to the village, and he took the hat back as a matter of fact, and she knew that the elderly man was on edge. In those years she learned to be wary of the old war hawk. From what info she was privileged with as the Hokage's aide, she always was afraid that he might come for her daughter and make her into the very thing her old village wanted. But like it or not, she still had a job to do, so she placed a polite, and fake, secretary's smile on. "Good evening, Shimura-sama, may I offer you a drink?" she asked with practiced ease. Hiruzen had walked around his desk to sit in his chair, leaving poor Iruka to sit nervously next to Danzo. "That would be lovely, my dear, thank you. I'll take a masu like these gentlemen." Hiruzen was stuffing his pipe, but dropped it on the floor, almost breaking it and spilling the still unpacked tobacco. He looked at his old rival shocked. "Danzo, you don't drink." The elderly Hokage was ready to have a heart attack when he saw the man actually shrug in response. The scarred man plainly said, "There's a first time for everything, and I'm not getting any younger." "Ah, thank you, Ms." He finished accepting the small box from the young woman as she poured him a drink into his waiting hands. "Ah, I apologize, Mrs. Hitaki, I misspoke." The grizzled man corrected but seemed to ponder something as he took his first sip. "Forgive me again, this is none of my business, but you are still married, are you not?" he asked, in a bizarrely gentle tone, at least for him. Mabui blushed a little at the embarrassing question. It wasn't that she didn't love her husband dearly, but they had been separated for 3 years now, and she had only seen him here and there and when he spent time with their daughter. She had told him that he could come home, but he had yet to. "You know, I am still married. We are just working some things out." That last part was a slip, but the out-of-character man heard it. "I am sorry again. I am an old man and we old folk are a bit nosy, but if I may give some advice, young lady," he asked politely, to which he got a nervous nod from the dark-skinned woman. "If you want him back home, then bring him back home. We men are stupid, and it has taken me 80 long years to realize that. We live in the past and never move forward. We obsess on one thing and never see what is around us, and when we get old, we are so set in our ways that if we do see it is too late and we die with regrets." He looked at her and Mabui actually felt comforted by his gaze. "If you truly still love Kakashi, then you will save him from himself and drag his sorry ass back to his daughter, where he belongs and is needed." Danzo, the man who took in orphans to strip them of their emotions and make them killing machines, ended his passionate speech. Mabui was stunned, but she felt for the first time a little hope. She gave the old man a genuine smile and refilled his masu. She didn't know if she could trust the man or his words, but she couldn't deny his logic, and it gave her a lot to think about. But she was certain that letting this go any longer would only hurt their family. She had to find her husband and talk to him. One thing was for sure, she had been so lonely, and missed being in his arms. Now Hiruzen was sure that his fellow elder was up to something. First, Danzo hadn't had a drink in years, and even then, it was just a small beer when they were much younger men. Second, as far as the Hokage had known him, he had never gotten emotional, ever, not even when the man's wife died in childbirth. And his son, well, that was something nobody talked about anyway. Iruka was also unsettled by the elder's behavior. He was not known for being courteous or polite, and actually spoke even to the daimyo like he had the right to give their country's ruler orders. "I hope Anko-chan takes her time with those favors I asked her, and keeps Naruto occupied. I don't know what will happen with this man, but Naruto should stay away for now," Iruka worried. Meanwhile, Naruto was taking his time and was just getting into the shower. He stood in the fairly spacious stall, it even had a bench for the old man. This wasn't the first time he used the Hokage's private bathroom, there was already a very nice soft white bathrobe ready for him when he was done. As he was getting in, something flashed into his eyes. The glint of metal gleaming in the fluorescent lights, it was the official Hittite he received from the Hokage. Naruto had to give Iruka-sensei his back because apparently all plates had a serial numbers on the back for identifying corpses, kinda like dog tags in civilian militaries. Begs the question why it was worn on the forehead when you could easily have your head taken in battle, certainly not because of the small amount of armor it gives. Why the hell even wear them? It's literally telling other ninja where you're from, like, hey, look at me. I'm from that village you really hate. Kinda stupid if you think about it. His academy sensei said that he graduated fair and square, and the old man agreed, saying that he will push the paperwork through for the enlistment process, both agreeing that learning the shadow clone jutsu was enough to pass. They said how proud of him they were, and he had earned his right to call himself a ninja through his bravery and service to the village, but Naruto had his doubts. He thought back to how he allegedly earned it. Flashback. Naruto stood stunned, staring at the smiling scarred man. He beaten Mizuki to a pulp with his new clone technique, but he was still alive, still breathing. Iruka had given the headband and Naruto was so overcome with joy he had glomped on the poor injured man and cried tears of happiness. Finally, he was a ninja. Or maybe that was because his favorite teacher didn't hate him for containing the fox, and actually cared about him and respected him. Maybe it was both, who is to say, but it was the best moment in his entire lonely life. And that was when they heard the broken and bruised human trash start chuckling. Ha ha ha, so what? The human punching bag said, through pain-clenched teeth. So what if one man cares about you? You're still a monster. No one else will ever accept you, he continued and coughed a little at the end, choking on his own blood. Shut it, Mizuki. You have already lost. There is no point in your posturing, Iruka said, firm but tired. His wounds started to get to him. Where the hell are those Anbu? I'm a dead man, Iruka. They're going to execute me for sure, so I might as well get the last laugh, the former teacher's assistant said. The battered traitor was able to sit up, grunting with great agony, but he was able to look at the blonde-haired boy in the blue eye. Do you really think you can be Hokage? Alright, so you're a ninja now. Big whoop. I've been a ninja for years and I never made it past Chunin. I didn't even get to be a full sensei, just a shitty assistant. What makes you think you, an unwanted orphan, can ever be respected enough to become Hokage? Naruto was getting angry now, not knowing that was what the treasonous Chunin wanted. That's not true. The boy growled, but this only got the bastard laughing more. What? The fact you won't be Hokage? Or the fact your parents didn't love you and gladly gave you up as a human sacrifice? At this the boy faltered. He had always wondered why he didn't have parents. He was only told they were dead, but he never knew if they wanted him, if they loved him. Mizuki continued to chuckle even more, seeing that his words were hitting home. Besides Iruka, who else cares about you? Does anyone at all? He goaded. Naruto had an answer. There is. There's Hokage Gigi, the nice people at Ichiraku Ramen Bar, my classmates, and Sakura-chan, and, he fumbled a bit which had the Chunin traitor grinning. That's it. That's all you got. Pathetic. Mizuki shook his head, acting like he pitied the boy. Face it's Naruto, you got no one. I admit the old man has a soft spot for you, but he's ancient. How much longer do you think he has? A year maybe. Less. He's going to finally croak someday and then you got one less person, don't you? And no more protection either. If the villagers don't run you out, they will certainly kill you. And those ramen slingers. So, what? What does some 2-bit cook and his piece of ass daughter matter? They don't. He looked at Naruto and saw he was getting what he wanted. Naruto was shaking. Angry, hurt, sad, and very confused. A voice in his head kept telling him not to listen, to stay calm, that Mizuki was not worth it. But it was so hard to remain calm. The burning anger he felt in his very being was taking over his mind. It was like years of pain was demanding for blood, demanding that Naruto rip Mizuki apart with his bare hands. However, he didn't move and kept listening. Your classmates. Now that's just delusional. They couldn't give two shits if you were dead. You're a nobody. The man got his most deranged and sinister grin yet, and your precious Sakura-chan. Naruto's eyes flew open wide. He stared at the ground, as a cold feeling started to consume his heart. She will never love you. She only has eyes for her Sasuke-kun. He sneered. No. Shut up. The boy forced out, trying to not hear the rest. And you now what? He'll need help to rebuild his clan eventually, so he'll take your precious Sakura-chan to his bed in her like the good little she is. Naruto shook his head violently, trying to will the images of the girl he loves being taken by his rival. No. Stop it. Shut up. The boy kept saying, and she'll love it too. Mizuki went on with glee, she'll be begging for more and moaning in ecstasy as he heard to his heart's content. That's enough, you sick bastard. Iruka roared. He looked at his student. Naruto was shaking more violently now, mumbling incoherently. Iruka was worried for him. The boy had been through more than some ninja since he was little. The emotional stress right now could finally make Naruto break. Don't listen to him, Naruto. You have plenty of people who care about you, and Sakura isn't with Sasuke. He tried. That last part was the best he could come up with. He couldn't deny the traitor's logic. Sakura had always loved Sasuke. He watched for years as Iruka tried to get her to be less of a fangirl along with her peers, but to no avail. He saw the sensei even talk to the Harunos, Sakura's parents, but they said that their attempts were unsuccessful as well. Mizuki laughed harder, drowning out his words. Yes. She'll take his noble Uchiha over and over again, moaning and crying out his name like a cheap whore. He laughed out loud. Then he started to make a bad impression of the pink-haired girl, Sasuke-kun. Oh, Sasuke-kun. Yes, Sasuke-kun, yes. Me harder. He was gasping for breath, he was laughing so hard. And then, the traitor went too far. Yes, Sasuke-kun, me. Me like a whore. I love you, Sasuke-kun. Never that demon Naruto. After that everything went black, and then red. All Naruto could feel or hear was two things. His eyes burned and stung as a rush of energy filled him. There was voices. One was muffled, a man's voice, something about controlling himself. The other, however, was much clearer. Kit. Naruto, listen to me. It's okay. You are loved. You are loved. Please stop. The voice begged through sobs. Naruto then felt himself be engulfed in a hug from behind and ripped back away as he was restrained. Naruto blinked the rage-induced reddish haze away and shook his head clear. The burst of energy left him and now he was so tired and his skin felt like fire. He looked around and he was still in the forest. There were brown leather-clad arms wrapped around his middle and he felt two big squishy round things behind his head. He looked and was met by watery brown eyes, purple hair, and leaf protective plate. It was a woman. She seemed familiar. She stopped whispering comforting words in his ear and looked at him. Naruto. Naruto, can you hear me? She asked firmly but with clear worry, but she didn't seem mad or anything. The blonde boy just nodded, and she breathed out, thank God. Anko-chan, Iruka said as he was helped over to them by an Anbu with silver spiked up hair and a dog mask. The purple-haired woman, Anko, looked at his teacher. It's all right now, Iruka-kun. He's all right now, she said as Iruka and the Anbu both seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. All right, everyone stand down. A gruff aged voice called out. Naruto looked to the voice and it was his surrogate grandfather, with Anbu ready to attack. Naruto whipped his head around and finally noticed that he was surrounded by Anbu Black Ops, all putting their weapons away. He always had a sense when it came to know if someone hated him. It was like he just knew if someone had bad vibes, and all around were pushing out some major vibes. But when they dropped their guard, the feeling went away, as if they weren't directing their fear towards him. Gigi. What's going on? He asked with a quivering voice. The elderly man just gave him a kind grandfatherly smile like always, but even Naruto could tell there was a hint of something sadder in his weary brown eyes. It's alright Naruto-kun, you're safe now, the Hokage said, but Naruto could tell he was worried about something. Naruto. The woman said to get his attention. He looked at her. Her face was calm and gentle. How about you give me that kunai, she asked. Naruto was confused and looked at his hand. He wished he didn't. He did in fact have a kunai knife in his hand in a death grip, and he was covered in blood. The boy started to panic. What? He tried to struggle out of the woman's hold, but she held on tight. Naruto, it's okay, you're alright. You are not hurt. Just calm down, hun, and give me the knife, she said. But Naruto didn't listen. What's going on? He shouted. He finally got out of the strange purple-haired woman's hold and scrambled away from everyone. He looked at all the adults with wide scared eyes. Naruto, just come over here to me and Anko-chan. Everything is going to be alright. Iruka tried, but he shook his head as he continued to back up. His foot bumped into something, and he started to look over at it. Naruto. The woman said, raising her voice. He looked back to her. Don't look at anything but me. Keep your eyes on me and come over here. Please, she said, voice filled even more concern. Naruto didn't know why, but he went to look again. Naruto. Don't look, she shouted. But it was too late. Naruto saw in the dim moonlight that he bumped into a sandal that was still on someone's foot. He looked up slowly and he saw it was a person on the ground. He then saw the white hair of Mizuki. But just when the boy's eyes landed on his face, the clouds cleared in the night sky, revealing the full moon, giving more light. And then he saw it all. Mizuki was covered in stab wounds all over his torso. His eyes were still open, filled with terror, and his mouth in an unheard scream. His face was mutilated with 5 long gashes, and his throat had a large gaping wound, as if it was ripped out by an animal. He looked at all the blood he was covered in, the metallic taste on his tongue, and it all clicked. Mizuki was dead, and he killed him. Naruto stumbled back. He felt nauseous and dizzy. He heard voices calling out to him, and then he was falling, and then black. Naruto spun around and dropped to his knees before the white porcelain bowl and heaved. He threw up and didn't seem like he was going to stop. Oh God, what have I done? He was able to cry in between hurls and then repeated. Mizuki was a traitor, scum of the earth, but Naruto was the one who had to deal with consequences now that he was dead. He had made his first kill. He had been blooded. The door opened with a slam and swiftly someone kneeled next to him by the toilet and rubbed his robbed back. Shish, it's okay. Just let it out, she said. It was not Mabui Oba, but the voice was still familiar. He seemed to calm down. Just breath, hun. Breath slowly, the woman said as Naruto sobbed a little now that he had purged all he could. She got up and flushed the toilet and then went to the sink. Naruto sat on the floor staring the white marble tile. A pair of feet came into view. They had the standard issue ninja sandals on. Hey, the woman said, and Naruto looked up. Before him was a woman about early 20s. She had shin armor that went up to her knees, an orange-brown mini skirt wrapped around and held with a buckle, and a belt with 2 bands on one side over a pair of fishnet armor shorts. Naruto had the decency to blush when he noticed that she was only wearing mesh armor. While not see-through, It was still really sheer and tight, it didn't leave much to the imagination, especially since you could see the full curvature of her ample D-cup. To top it all, she wore a brown leather trench coat. But when Naruto saw her face though, specifically her hair, that was when he recognized the woman. She had a smirking face, she actually was very pretty in a tomboy kind of way, she had purple shaggy hair held up in a fanned-out ponytail. It was the woman from earlier. Here, rinse your mouth out, she said, handing him a paper cup of water. She then got a very pretty smile, and afterwards you may go back to ogling my tits, she said, batting her eyes. Naruto really turned red. I wasn't. I'm not a pervert. He sputtered, protesting, and then angrily rinsed out his mouth and spat in the toilet before standing up to face the woman. I'm not saying you are. As long as you don't say something or try to play grab ass, then I have no problem with it. Everyone looks, it's only natural, especially at your age. If anyone says they are uncomfortable or having a private moment, that is when you are supposed to stop, she said with all honesty. Naruto looked at her tentatively. Then, why do the girls in my class always beat me up when they think I'm being a pervert? He asked, curious. His face never understood that. He would say Sakura looked pretty on any given day, but she would always call him a pervert and punch him. The woman sighed. There's a lot of reasons. Dumb parents, growing up civilian, etc. Really, it just boils down to society. Those girls are just following the crowd, being fed a bunch of conformist bullshit about what is proper. If we lived in another village, those girls would be getting a major wake-up call with real seduction training and not tea ceremonies and flower arrangements. Trust me, it's not pretty. They have no idea how privileged they are to live in Konoha. Most kunoichi get treated like street-walking whores and never get the chance to be more. To be real warriors. She then smiled at him, but there is nothing wrong with a healthy, as long as you don't force anyone into doing things they don't want or like, or don't place your personal tastes above others and say they are wrong for liking it the way they like it. Then you will be fine, hun, and can look at all the tits you want. Hell, legally you're an adult now. I could you and take your virginity right here right now if the mood struck me, she said, finishing with a cheesy grin. Naruto's eyebrows rose to his hairline. Really? He asked innocently, with not so innocent thoughts racing through his mind. She gave him a smile that made his heart flutter. Why? You wanna? She asked, getting close to him with a seductive smile. Naruto gulped and weighed his options. The part that was a hormonal 13-year-old boy won out. Yes, he answered. Her smile got devilish. Well then, can't say you aren't bad looking. I could look into those blues for hours, she said, taking his face in her calloused, yet still soft, warm hands with slender fingers. She got really close, as if to kiss him. Naruto closed his eyes, the lids fluttering shut. But then she just kissed his nose and backed away, chuckling. Sorry, but I already got a boyfriend, so no nookie from me, cutie. She then laughed even harder at his reaction. It was that face Ibiki would make when Anko was able to get a lie past the master interrogator. Naruto couldn't believe it. Was he just pranked? Him. Naruto Uzumaki, the Hidden Leaf's prince of pranks, had been hoisted by his own petard. This was unacceptable. By the way, my name is Anko Mitarashi, not Mitarashi-san or any of that shit. And no Anko-chan, because only my lover can call me that. So, you can just call me Anko, for now, she said, but he still was pouting. Anko rolled her eyes. Men were such sulking babies. She grabbed the back of his head and yanked his face toward her. Before Naruto knew what was going on, his face was enveloped by something he had never felt before. The boy's face was mashed into two squishy but firm orbs that smelled really nice. It felt like heaven, like home. There, happy now? Anko asked. Naruto looked up to her voice. He saw her smiling, playful face looking down at him, and that's when he realized it. She was hugging him, and his face was comfortably fitted into her large and amazing. Anko saw that shocked but happy look in his eyes and chuckled. Works every time, she mentally cheered. Stay with me, kid. Don't go passing out on me now, and if you get blood on me, I'll never do this for you again, she said and got a muffled, "Yes, ma'am," from the blonde boy. She held him there for a little bit longer. He grew up without a mother, the kid deserved a little coddling. She stroked his hair and was rewarded with him wrapping his arms around her back. He gave out a cute sigh, snuggling into her bosom more. The poor kid, all he ever wanted in his life was a little affection. Anko had actually been by his side his whole life. When she first saw him as a baby, she fell in love. She tried to adopt him but was denied. The Hokage was willing but didn't like that she was so young, only 15, so he was reluctant. Some assholes on the council, civilians, said she couldn't be trusted and would pit the demon against them. But it wasn't just her. Her best friend Mabui tried too. That went over just as well. It worse than Anko's response really. Not even Anko had heard of such language but made a note to look out for it so she can act accordingly. Which would usually involve someone having something bitten off by one of her serpentine friends. There was rumor that even the late matriarch of the Uchiha clan tried to adopt him in secret. She didn't really know how true it was, but she had seen the woman watching him as he slept in the hospital or played at the park. Anko couldn't look into it though, as another rumor that the same woman was trying to file for divorce became more popular, which was then overshadowed by the clan being wiped out. Either way, as far as Anko knew, somebody always came up with an excuse as to why whoever asked could not adopt Naruto Uzumaki. Eventually a decree was made that Naruto could not be adopted because he was a Jinchuriki and thus belonged to the village. The Sandaime assured Anko that everything would be all right. They couldn't claim he was not human, so he still had rights. He was placed in the orphanage where they would take care of him. Still, Anko would not be deterred. With her desperation to protect her little blonde, she flew through the special Jonin test. She now had the authority to protect him and end anyone that tried to harm him. The Hokage even offered her a spot in Anbu, under the mask of hubby, and be assigned as the little boy's personal bodyguard. She along with Inu and Karasu watched over him. Too bad about Karasu though, he didn't deserve to have that kind of burden. Even if his clan was planning a coup, purging them all was a bit much. But with her new assignment she kept watch over Naruto from the shadows. In respect for her friend, she asked Neko to look out for Karasu's little brother. According to the sword aficionado though, Karasu may have overdone it trying to get his little brother to hate him. Anko had seen the boy a few times and that seemed to be the case. Anko was very familiar with that particular glint in the boy's eyes. Neko was still in charge of watching the last of Karasu's clan, soon to be relieved now that he was a genin. Maybe Anko should talk to the woman and see if she noticed too, and that maybe they should talk to the Hokage about it. But that was another time. Right now Anko was only concerned about her favorite blonde, what it was like to be hated and to grow up alone. The snake mistress didn't know what happened with the orphanage. As far as she knew, the caretakers didn't hate him and treated him well, but as an Anbu she still had to take crucial assignments when called upon, and hubby had special skills that were needed. After an undercover mission that took 2 years to complete, Anko went to check on Naruto at the orphanage, but he wasn't there. She asked Inu, but he no longer was Anbu, having been reassigned back to Jonin because his daughter entered the academy. It was a strange policy, something about being available to train one's offspring. When Anko realized Naruto wasn't where he was supposed to be, she went into a panic and searched the whole village in a frenzy. She would sometimes overhear bigots whispering jokes about having a fox hunt, and the woman feared the worst. Finally she had found him sleeping inside a dumpster. When Anko looked him over, to her horror Naruto was on the verge of death. he was filthy and covered in infected wounds. If it wasn't for his quiet sobbing in his sleep, she would have thought him already dead. There was no signs of attack, but it was clear Naruto had been on his own and without proper care for a long time. She picked him up and tried to get him to the hospital, but it was late at night and there was only one nurse on duty. The bitch looked at him with a sneer and gave some bullshit about Anko not being Naruto's mother or legal guardian, so the hospital couldn't accept him. Anko was furious and would pay the nurse a visit later, but she had to make sure Naruto survived. She went to one of the few people that she could trust. Mabui. They had met when the former Kumo Kunoichi came to the village. The villagers were wary of her, so Anko felt a kindred spirit. Naruto was looked after as best as the women could. The sight was beyond horrid. He wasn't just injured, he was sick from exposure and eating garbage for God knows how long. It made Anko sick at the sight of the purposeful neglect. How could an entire village see a child in need on the street and just walk on by? Exclamation mark. He had at least a dozen poisons attacking his systems due to various infections and rotten food. There was even some evidence of rat poison. The fox's enhanced healing was the only thing keeping him alive, but he was weak and the open sores were infected and not healing properly. Not to mention he was malnourished, making him smaller than an 8-year-old should be. Mabui then remembered someone who could help. Mabui took over a woman's job as the Hokage's secretary so she could be a stay-at-home mom. Her name was Kabuki, or something. The woman was also part of the emergency civilian nurses corps back in the Third War. The blonde woman apparently didn't hate the boy. She wasn't exactly at ease around him, but at least knew better from her time in the war, although even she was appalled by the sight and her feelings changed quickly. The three women worked tirelessly for days trying to bring poor little Naruto back from the brink and eventually got him stable enough so he could heal. Naruto stayed with Mabui and Kakashi for 2 months as he recovered. Kakashi was beside himself. She understood he felt guilty and responsible, but Anko felt there was a deeper reason. She never found out what it was though. Their efforts were found out eventually though. The elders got word and ordered that he be placed in a special secure location, aka a cage underground where he would be tormented and never be treated like a human being again. The Sandaime emancipated Naruto on the spot, so that no one could touch him, and furnished him an apartment that was out of the way in the warehouse district. Thankfully, Naruto got better, and the Hokage was able to invoke the future Shinobi Act for him. If any orphan or civilian child wished to be a ninja, they would be given a scholarship as long as any veteran ninja was willing to be a sponsor so that the school could have someone act in place of a parent if needed regarding anything that involved the school, such as pay for books and other needs. So of course Anko took up the sponsorship. This also meant she got copies of Naruto's report cards. However, every time she got one, she wanted to go down to the academy and give them a piece of her mind, but she refrained and kept her distance. She didn't want her own bad representative to make Naruto's worse. She did find other ways, of course, as some unfortunate souls learned. Anko and Mabui, as well as the Ichirakus, helped Naruto as best and quietly as they could over the years. For instance, it was hard to get him to eat right. Ayame tried to get him to eat more veggies. But he had a phobia of what was in his food and didn't trust anything from the grocers, only eating at the ramen bar or pre-packaged and sealed meals. Ayame had the bright idea of hiding extra vegetables by adding raw juice to the menu and getting him to love the stuff. She also laced his food with herbal compounds and other supplements and vitamins. At least then he would get what he needed. Still though, those 2 years of neglect took its toll. They all hoped he would get some much-needed height during puberty if not sooner. But it wasn't all bad. Thanks to Anko sponsoring Naruto, that was how she met her Iruka-kun. She secretly got into his face one day, thinking he was like the other teachers sabotaging Naruto. The man had to have known Naruto needed extra help but did nothing. To her shock, he stood up to her, not something many men had the balls to do, which had totaled up none before the Chunin teacher came along. He admitted he wasn't sure about the boy at first, but he would not shirk his responsibilities. They would have more run-ins later. Iruka suggested getting Naruto tested, but nothing came of it. Anko was afraid that if word got out that the Jinchuriki was unstable or defective, then someone could use the information against Naruto. Anko watched as Iruka became close to the Naruto. One time Iruka even saved Naruto from foreign shinobi, having been tricked by classmates to go into a hostile zone hoping he would die. Anko was impressed and decided to give the Chunin teacher a special reward. That night Anko found out that Iruka Yumino was, well, he was her type and more, let's just say. They were officially dating by the next morning, and, because she told him they were and he was no position to argue, they have been together since. Eventually Anko had to leave Anbu because she didn't want to leave Naruto again. But for now, he was doing fine, well, about as fine as one could be when you are the village black sheep. So, for the last 2 years she had been working with the T&I department, which was great. It was like she had found her calling. But still, she wished she could do something that let her be more involved in her little blonde's life. As far as Naruto knew, this was the first time they had ever met. Anko started thinking, now that Naruto was a ninja, he would be going out there into the world to fight for his village. Was he ready? She believed in him, but still she would feel better if she had a guarantee that he was safe. But how? Kakashi had already called dibs on him, but he has never passed a team yet, and they will make it so he has to train the Uchiha above all else. Hatake was the only one in the village who could. According to Iruka-kun, it was most likely Naruto, and this Sasuke kid would be on the same team anyway. Anko's lover admitted that he was not hopeful if this happened. The two boys were constantly at odds, and Iruka felt that would be detrimental, if not to team cohesion then certainly to both boys' self-esteem and personal growth. Anko would agree. Many ninja believed that rivalry made ninja stronger. Anko did not. She hated the concept that beating the crap out of a comrade made you stronger. It just felt all too familiar. There had to be a way. She thought for a few moments as she held the Uzumaki, until she got an idea. It was going to step on a few toes, and there was no guarantee she could pull it off, but she had pulled more impossible miracles out of her ass. No, really, she had pulled a miracle out of her ass once thanks to a special device that doubled as a grenade. She mentally chuckled. Don't worry, Naruto-chan, I'll make sure you are the best ninja this damn village has ever seen, and their worst nightmare. I promise, when I'm done, they'll be begging for you to take the hat. She vowed. Anko had left after Naruto's little freakout was over. She left so he can have some privacy and finally take his shower, and no, he didn't take care of any needs. As attractive as Anko was, and how amazing it was to get to second base after a hug like that, he was more grateful for the attention than needy. When he got out of the shower, he remembered that he was still waiting for his new clothes, so he read one of the magazines. It was a restroom for an old man after all. It would be another 20 minutes later that Anko would come back alongside the returning Mabui, who finally had some clothes for him. The two women seemed to know each other and were talking away about something, some kind of plan that involved the graduates. He didn't know as he only caught the tail end, but what happened next would forever be the most embarrassing and, well, confusingly arousing conversation of his life. Yup. The two very attractive women told him he was now an adult, so he needed to know some things, very important things, and gave him the dreaded talk. Naruto learned where babies came from. And the fact two mature and smoking hot women were telling him made it all the more uncomfortable. While Mabui used diagrams and explained more mechanically, Anko was like a crazy over aunt that had admittedly good advice, if a bit pornographic. Still Anko was adamant about drilling things like consent and safe. Poor Naruto popped a boner and couldn't seem to keep it in his robe. Thankfully both women didn't tease him saying it was natural. He learned something strange though, apparently his member was not supposed to look like that naturally. According to his impromptu tutors he was something called circumcised. It was a procedure done to babies sometimes. Mabui said a lot of parents thought it was cleaner and healthier, but Anko said it was not popular in this region, so who in the hell did this to him? He was an orphan. Who went and made that kind executive decision? The ordeal was now thankfully over and the older women left with Anko making a joke of blowing a kiss and telling him to call her. He knew what she meant. He watched TV. Now he had privacy and could change into the clothes the Hokage's assistant had gotten him. To his surprise there was a pair of orange boxers with steaming bowls of ramen. A note was pinned to them. It read, "A good ninja must remain hidden." It was signed by Mabui Oba with a heart. He got the meaning. There was nothing wrong with wearing his favorite color, he just had to wear it in a different way. He slipped on the new clean underwear and continued. He first put on the mesh armor shirt, a common item for ninja, both shinobi and kunoichi alike, that came in many styles but often resembled regular clothing. This one was a tight long-sleeved t-shirt with a crew neck. The mesh was made up of wire, almost like the kind used in combat, woven in a tight fishnet pattern with a layer of fabric between the wearer and the armor to keep from chafing. This was perfect given that all warriors, ninja or otherwise, used a blade of some kind. The metal wires were almost impervious to slashes and cuts. The pants were a dark navy blue and a little baggy. As he pulled them up, he felt something. Rubbing the cloth in between his thumb and index finger, he found the pants also had mesh wire in between two layers of lightweight but durable textile. Useful, he thought, quickly putting them on. I loved that it had lots of pockets. Now it was time for footwear. A pair of black leather steel-toe boots, something Naruto never had before. Ninja always wore a special kind of sandal that looked like sneakers with the toes cut off. Not practical, and the excuse was tradition, but in actuality it was because sandals used less materials, so they were cheaper to make. Naruto actually hated wearing sandals. 2 years of his childhood was spent homeless after he had to leave the orphanage. It was either stay or watch as his presence kept supporters and potential adopters away. After all the kindness he was shown by the caretakers and all those kids that would no longer have home if the orphanage failed, the choice was clear to Naruto. But in that time, he learned what it meant to be without, and there were sandals plenty in every trash can. Naruto always wore a pair of standard sandals he got from the Hokage once a year, but the thing about sandals was, they aren't much use in the rain or snow. He always thought ninja who wore them in the winter were insane. It was a miracle that his feet never turned black and fell off. He always hated the cold since and made sure to stay warm even though the land of fire was a bit of a southern climate. The boots were an unexpected treat. He never could afford any before. He quickly put on the cozy socks and slipped his feet in. The young orphaned Uzumaki had tears building up in his eyes. He had never had anything so comfy, or warm, in his life. Mabui Oba was always so nice to him, but this was something he would forever be grateful to her for. Naruto started to lace them up and decided to tuck his pant legs in. No point in tripping over his own trousers. The last was a new jacket. It was almost identical to his old one, but it was black leather instead of the orange canvas material. It had the same blue shoulders and cream padded collar like his old one. When he put it on, it too was quite snug like his shirt but not as much, giving plenty of movement. Normally he liked baggy clothing because A, he didn't want his movements restricted, and B, because he was still growing and didn't get a lot of chances to buy new things. Naruto thought about it and Anko flashed into his mind. Was it her? Did she help get me all this stuff? But why? Naruto remembered how she saved him from his own rage, now realizing that he had been overtaken by the power of the Nine Tails, the way she had held him in the forest and just a few minutes ago. Does she care about me? But why? I've never met her before, I think. Naruto shook his thoughts away. Whatever her reason, she made it clear she didn't hate him like many other adults, so he will make a point to get to know and thank her for her kindness. Since Mabui knew her, then maybe they hang out or something. So, taking page from his, hopefully, new friend, Naruto left the jacket open. After he was dressed, he discovered that there was a large box, a kind of crate or trunk. On top was another note. A ninja must be well equipped and ready for anything, always be prepared and keep your enemy guessing. It wasn't signed by the Hokage or his secretary, and he didn't recognize the handwriting. The only indicator of who may have wrote it was a little drawing of a cute little snake winking at assumed it was Anko. When his face was pressed into her lady pillows, so nice, he noticed she was wearing a necklace of snake's fang, meaning she must like snakes. Makes sense to me, he thought. Naruto opened the crate and saw his new equipment. It started with pair of navy blue fingerless gloves with armored plating on the of the hand. He really liked the gloves and wondered how he could use the armor. He may have had great grades, but that didn't mean he didn't listen. Iruka taught that they must protect his hands because that was the first an enemy ninja would strike for that part to prevent you from make hand signs. Naruto also noted that it was Mizuki who taught his class, quote, cut off theirs before they cut off yours. For Naruto still didn't like that he killed, but, enjoy hell, asshole, he thought. Naruto shook the dark thought away and looked through the trunk more. He picked up a very nice leather belt, thick and durable, guaranteed to last a lifetime, with leg straps added on. The buckles seemed to snap together rather than looped, and there appeared to be brackets of some kind. Naruto looked at the tag and saw a picture of the same belt, but the buckle was. Naruto smiled and got his new headband. He unsnapped the plate from the cloth and onto the brackets. Now that's how you wear it, the boy thought, pleased as he started putting the belt on. He was not completely sure about the leg parts because the upper strap was looped around his upper thigh, right next his crotch and right under each butt cheek, with the lower loop just above his knees. But once he put it on, the young blonde found it to be not as bad as he thought, a bit unnecessarily flattering, but not uncomfortable. It certain made the bagginess of the pants less noticeable in tandem with shin-high laced-up boots. Then he started to attach the various pouches. And again, he was pleasantly surprised that the nice women had put a lot of thought and effort. This was definitely not standard equipment. There was a 2 hard cases covered in a padded other shell, a scroll about the size of his arm, and 1 flat push that had to be a holster of some kind. The belt and its accessories had to be top of the line as the material and design was far more advanced than the traditional hip pouches. He opened them up and smiled brightly, feeling like he could cry again. In the utility cases were various ninja supplies and tools, stuff he never could get on his own, and thus part of why he did so terribly in the academy, aside from other reasons. One was a first aid kit with medical supplies. When he took stock of it, he found everything he would need from minor injuries and illnesses to a few vials of antidote for different bites and poisons, and a suture kit. He was by no means a medic, but he never quite could trust the hospital, so he taught himself how to handle his own wounds when in a pinch, which was often, so he got a lot of practice. He attached that one to his left hip, and despite its cubical shape, it didn't bulge out awkwardly. The other case was a surplus of brand new kunai and shuriken, and of much better quality than what he had. Naruto was honestly surprised. He wasn't of that you could different kinds of kunai. The new blades were flatter and didn't have as much weight. They were black like all kunai, but instead of polished they a soft matte finish. Naruto spun and twirled the knife, test the weight, and found that it was really good, and the lighter weight made the blade practically glide around his fingers. There was other things like shuriken. He would have to get used to those or else he might cut himself. They were also flat, seeming like they were stamped out of solid steel and sharpened to razor's edge. Standard shuriken were thinner and with only the point being sharp. This was so a ninja could hold more than one in a hand. There was a few spools of ninja wire and a thick stack of paper bombs, two items Naruto was familiar with. They were a prankster best tools after all. The whiskered Mark boy had never been able to get new tools and equipment because the local Ninja Mart, a popular chain store that spanned all nations and served ninja with all kinds of needs, even with its fixed cooperate prices, was much too expensive, plus the civilian employees were never keen on him being there. It got worse when he tried to buy from a private seller. Konoha, like any other, had few select merchants that were allowed travel privileges. They traveled all over, so they got many unique ninja items that weren't normally found locally. Unfortunately, they were also all civilian. They wouldn't even let him near their stalls, and shoo him away. So, with no desire to make himself a bigger target of hatred and force the issue, Naruto had come to sneak into the training grounds and collect anything he could find. Some things were in fairly good shape and only needed a good sharpening. It appalled him how wasteful ninja could be. But that was like one or two tools Naruto could find. The rest he had to reforge himself. The basement furnace of the abandoned apartment building he lived in could be used as a rudimentary forge. It made his apartment too hot though. Naruto placed the case on his right hip opposite of his first aid kit. He looked to the smaller flat case, and upon inspection it did appear to be a holster of a kind, as it was open at the top. He placed 5 kunai in one slot and 10 shuriken in the other, along with a few slips of the explosives and a length of wire wrapped around 2 specially designed hooks. Looking at his new setup, he reasoned it was supposed to go on the extra straps around his legs. At the bottom of the crate was 2 black boxes, one bigger and one smaller. He picked the smaller up and opened it. Inside was some kind of device. It had a more traditional kunai attached to a cable. Inside the lid was a small diagram with instructions. Hidden kunai mechanism, the whiskered blonde read out loud. From what he could gather, it was to be worn up his sleeve, and where with a flick of his wrist the knife would shoot out and into his hand. Naruto took his right arm out the sleeve of his new jacket. Once in place, he tested it out. Sure enough, with a flick of his wrist the blade shot into his hand. He fumbled a little but got it pretty quickly after few more tries. Now this is really cool, he thought. The young genin had read that there was always new tools being made. He was an avid reader of the ever-popular magazine Ninja and Tools. It had articles on latest ninja gear and weapons. Maybe I can make something, Naruto idly thought, and why not? He may have not been the brightest, but he was handy. Naruto took out the longer box. It was bit heavier than the other one, and the cardboard was dusty and old-looking. It must have been in storage for a long time, he thought. This one had a full letter, and this one he recognized as the Sandame's handwriting. This is a very special blade. They were only made once at the start of the Third War by our village. This was the last ever made. I found it one day and had been saving it just for you. I know you will make good use of it. It conducts chakra and creates a longer blade made of pure chakra, but be careful using it. Your unsteady control is a result of having such high reserves, and there is no telling what you can produce. I would advise testing it in a proper training ground first. If you need help, don't hesitate to ask. I may know just the man who can help. Naruto frowned. He wasn't mad at his Gigi, rather a little irritated, remembering the academy. He knew perfectly well that his poor control was caused by having obscene reserves, but did anyone care? Nope. Naruto shook his head and opened the box. Inside was a sheathed dagger. Even after so many years in storage, it looked brand new. The leather sheath was still supple. Naruto pulled out the blade and marveled at it. Her could tell it was finely made. The sharp double edge shined in the fluorescent light. The hilt had the sigil of the leaf, and the grip felt just right. Naruto attached the blade to his right leg. He was right-handed but could use his left hand defensively quite well, and this way he can hold his dagger and with one hand throw his kunai and shuriken with the other. Now for that scroll, he thought. It was pretty big, it was the length of his forearm and only just a bit thicker. There was 2 clip hooks on either side of the dowel so it had to go on his lower back. He looked at what was in it as the last scroll he read had a really cool clone jutsu that he could actually do. He opened it up and he was puzzled. In it was strange symbols. It reminded him of paper bombs but the center symbol was not right and a few of the ones circling it were in the wrong place. The truth was Naruto couldn't read or write very well. In the orphanage he was taught basic kanji, but having to leave his first home and no teacher in the early years of the academy was willing to help, he never learned properly. By the time he had gotten to Iruka class for his final training he didn't bother, mostly because if the rest of the kids found he would be taunted more than ever, so Naruto did his best to make do but it was still a crippling condition sometimes. As for this kind of weird calligraphy he thinks Naruto thinks seen it a few times. He didn't know what it meant, but for some reason it felt like he understood it even he couldn't read it. There was one last sticky note now with handwriting he did not recognize, that said, to activate seal add chakra, there was no moniker. He just shrugged and did what it said. It took him a bit because his control was shit and had trouble keeping a little bit of chakra in his finger. It would either fizzle out or flare to the point he was afraid of burning the scroll. Finally, he got the right amount and there was a puff of smoke. It nearly gave him heart attack and he squealed like a baby pig. When the smoke cleared the seal was gone, in its place was a backpack. When Naruto looked inside it was backed with camping gear and the like. It was practically a full survival kit. It had a fair amount of rope, a hatchet, a multi-tool, a bed-roll and sleeping bag, and various odds and ends that could fit in the mid-sized, rugged pack. He would still need to pack food and clothes, but it had plenty of room for all that, and was nonetheless a very much appreciated. There was also a book and a scroll that said beginner fuinjutsu. Inside the book was blank white paper and came with a calligraphy brush and ink stone with a solid bar of ink. He opened the jutsu scroll. After reading the introduction as best he could he was delighted realizing it was a school of jutsu that sounded really cool. Fuinjutsu could be used for seals of all kinds of things. And it was discipline that required huge amounts of chakra like his own. And there were plenty of pictures of examples that he could just copy so poor reading skills would be problem. It was perfect for him. He placed the pack back into the seal and with another puff it disappeared. So cool. Naruto looked at himself all dressed and geared up and he liked it. He liked it a lot. Again it was a lot snugger than he normally wore his clothes but he had to admit it was nice seeing his hard work on display. The new fit was nice actually, like it was all made just for him, but still will take some getting used to as he unconsciously tugged at the crew neck of his armored shirt. At least the pants and jacket weren't restricting his movements, however with his jacket open you can see his abs. Well okay, he was a prepubescent boy so he didn't have a six-pack but it was defiantly toned. Wait until all the girls in class see me like this. Hell even Ino would at least notice. I may have my heart set on Sakura-chan but I'm not blind. He thoughtfully mused. Naruto shook his head chuckling at his thoughts. What the hell was going on his head? Oh well, he'll get a lot of attention at team placements, that was for sure. Back in the office the air was tense. Danzo had been talking for the last hour straight. Hiruzen had never heard his old teammate speak that much in one sitting. And what he was talking about. All his dirty dealings and everything incriminating he had ever committed. From his involvement with Orochimaru's inhuman experiments, the knowledge he held back that there was an Uchiha controlling the Kyuubi, what he did to himself and what was really in his right eye and his right arm, to confessing that he never dissolved root as ordered. Mabui and Iruka were no better. Some of the man's confessions were just downright sick. Mabui, who had just come back from dropping off Naruto's things, was especially appalled. He made his root kunoichi do seduction missions, real seduction like she was trained to do back in Kumo, even though such orders had been forbidden in Konoha for over 3 decades now. The Leaf just didn't want their kunoichi to have such a reputation. It ended up being smart because they got a lot of requests for body doubles for princesses, debutante nobles, daughters of wealthy merchants, and etc. It had become a very lucrative niche. Anko was sitting as calmly as she could, restraining from feeding the old buzzard to one of her snake friends. Danzo had mentioned what he would have done if Naruto was left in his custody. It all hit a little too close to home. Most of her memories under Orochimaru were gone, but somehow, she still remembered how he pushed her to nearly breaking. It was like a feeling more than memory, but she knew somehow it was true. The Hokage cleared his throat, getting everyone's attention. Mabui, Uruka, Anko, would you three please step outside? I wish to speak to Elder Danzo. Alone. His tone was calm but deadly, that brokered no room for argument. Not that the two Jonin and the Chunin teacher would, they didn't want to stay and get caught in the crossfire, although Anko may just send a really big snake if she felt her Hokage needed backup. So, they quietly but quickly made for the exit, each giving a bow as they left. Uruka and Anko went to get coffee from the Jonin lounge downstairs while Mabui decided to call her daughter and make sure she was okay. The door shut, and then all hell broke loose. The room was filled with an aura of killing intent, so intense it could make the Kyuubi choke under its spiritual pressure, and it all came crashing down on the War Hawk in an instant. Hiruzen Sarutobi had only been this furious once. It was the time when Anko told him how she had found a battered and deathly sick little Naruto. He was so mad at his village he almost went on a rampage that would have made his volatile kunoichi student proud. To hell with his position. It took his aide and all 4 of his personal guard 2 hours to calm him down, but eventually they did, not before creating Training Ground 23. A barren, desolate waste of land with nothing but giant sharp rocks. But now his old rival, friend, and teammate had just confessed to not only undermining his authority and every move he ever made, but was the cause to nearly every one of his greatest failures. For years he blamed himself for the actions of his treasonous student, and here was Danzo Shimura revealing that he was the one behind it all. Danzo just stared at his old rival in utter shame. He needed to confess. He couldn't move on with his life carrying these sins in his heart. Hiruzen, my old friend, please, calm down. He tried to say, struggling to speak. Calm down. Calm down. What the Danzo? What? How am I to? Grr. What the hell is the meaning of this? The Sandame was going ape shit, no pun intended. How was he supposed to receive this information? Was the old War Hawk lying? Is this a ploy for another one of his schemes? The Hokage just looked at the man across from him with the hard glare of a leader to one of the most powerful military powers in the world, a position not given lightly. Only to a ninja hardened by years of battle can achieve it. Danzo was sweating and starting to breath heavier. If he was in better health, he could handle this kind of aura easily, but not in his condition. Hiruzen, I'm begging you, please calm down. I can't take much more of this, he ragged. He then coughed, getting blood on his white handkerchief. The Hokage eyes widened and reined in the hostile aura, and Danzo started hacking and coughing up a storm now that he was free. Never had the man been unable to handle the pressure-killing intent. Hiruzen looked closer, and to his shock Danzo looked like he was about to keel over. Hiruzen immediately got up and went to his old friend's side. He took the sake bottle and refilled his masu. Here Danzo, drink this, he said as he handed the bandaged man the square wooden cup. Probably not the best idea, but the alcohol would at least calm down his nerves. Danzo took the drink carefully with shaking hands. Thank you, my friend, he said gratefully and took a few good gulps. Danzo, are you alright? The third asked concerned. Danzo just chuckled mirthlessly. That is a loaded question, but as for this moment I am fine, Hiruzen. The Hokage looked at the man he had known since they were boys. Never in his life, even when Danzo was crippled in the Second War, had Hiruzen ever seen his longtime comrade look so frail. He was pale and for the first time looked his age, older even. The leader of the Leaf made his way back to his chair and picked his pipe up. He started getting it ready again, all the while waiting for his old friend's explanation. Danzo watched the Hokage and saw the look of expectance in the man's eyes as he smoked his pipe. He waited until the Hokage had gotten settled. This will be fun, the old war hawk thought and looked at his comrade straight in the eyes. I'm dying, Hiruzen, was all he said. The Hokage looked at Danzo for a moment, processing what was just said. When it hit the leader of the Hidden Leaf Village, he was stunned, then he started to chuckle. His amusement grew and so did his laughter. Until he was slumped over his desk pounding his fist, guffawing like a madman. The old war hawk was not as amused, however. So you think my impending death is funny? Danzo growled out, clearly trying not to raise his voice lest he give the man more reason to mock him. He has made some grievances against his old friend, sure, but he didn't think it constituted his demise being something to laugh at. Hiruzen kept laughing and Danzo finally had enough. Knock it off. You perverted old monkey baka. He roared. Hiruzen Sarutobi didn't know why he found the fact one of his oldest friends dying was funny. Maybe it was just the timing of it all. Nonetheless, he tried to control his humor. He calmed down and wiped a tear from his eye. Calm down, grumpy old buzzard Tem. Now that Hiruzen had control, he smiled at his friend, enjoying the old nicknames. I'm sorry, my friend, but you have to see it from my view. Is that what this is about? Some attempt at saving your soul by confessing your sins? The old Hokage asked, although he was still chuckling at the thought, knowing Danzo was not like that. Danzo blinked a little, thinking about it. That was not his intention. He just wanted to make amends before he died, if not for himself then maybe for the few people who still called him friend after all these years. He didn't really care about things like religion, he thought more on it, and indeed the whole thing was a bit absurd. The elder started chuckling with his Hokage and before either knew it they were both laughing anew. It had been a long time since they could laugh together like this, far too long. Danzo was the first to calm down. Yes, I suppose it does seem like that, doesn't it? He said. His smile then became melancholier. But it's still true. I don't have much longer for this world, he said, looking down. There was so much he had to make up for. The Hokage looked at his friend with care. Even after all Danzo had done, he couldn't really hate him, and it saddened him to see his once confident rival turn into a dying old man. Hiruzen thought back on when he taught young Naruto about forgiveness. Danzo is right, I am much too merciful, the Hokage thought. How much longer? The Sandaime finally asked. The elder merely shrugged and reached for the bottle to refill his wooden cup. Not long, a year my medics tell me, maybe less, he said, pouring himself a new drink. He was taking a gulp when his compatriot asked, how? A simple question, that had a complicated answer, but one he was prepared for. Danzo put his masu on the desk and stood up. He then proceeded to take off his bandages, the sealing arm braces, and the upper portion of his robes, revealing all that he had done to himself. Hiruzen looked on in horror at what Danzo had become. He wasn't lying, he really did it, he thought in heartache. Danzo, what have you done to yourself? He couldn't help but ask, and the warmonger chuckled. I already told you, I have funded and overseen many things that I thought would benefit the Leaf, regardless of whether it was ethical or not. But really, as I have come to realize, it was all from my own hubris. I just could not let go of the fact that Tobirama-sensei made you Hokage and not me. For that I am truly sorry, my friend. But my arrogance has become my downfall in the end. My body is too old and can no longer sustain the modifications I have made to it. The irony made me realize that even if I wasn't dying, I still have simply grown too old to be what this village needs. And all my ideals will go unfilled and die with me, Danzo said, a few tears escaping. He had truly wasted his life. The Hokage felt for his friend. I may not completely understand what you are going through, but please believe me when I say I empathize with that statement. I was supposed to retire long ago, as you already know, he said. I suppose we both are just getting too old then. Danzo agreed as he redressed himself. Hiruzen nodded, feeling the same. That is why Hashirama-sensei spoke of the will of fire. I taught my son it's like shogi. The future is the king and we must protect the king. We must keep the fire burning. If we are to fight, we must do it for something more than just attaining more to power to keep fighting. And to his satisfaction, Danzo nodded. I agree, I see that now, he said. Danzo, you really are trying to change, the Hokage thought. Once done, Danzo remained standing looking into his friend's eyes. But that is not why I am here, Hokage-sama, he spoke professionally. The man behind the desk looked at him for a moment and then sighed. So, you are here because of Naruto, he simply said. Yes, but do not worry, my friend, I am not here to try and take him. You were right, he deserved a chance as the Yondaime wished, Danzo admitted. The Hokage snorted unamused. A chance, yes, but chances were fleeting and didn't always mean a person had the opportunity to use them. Then what is it? Hiruzen asked. Genuinely curious, there was no reason for Danzo to involve himself if he did not have an agenda. This new Danzo will have to take some getting used to. The former Anbu commander and elder to the leaf held his stare into old friend's eyes. I know what has happened tonight. I know what the young Uzumaki has gone through. I believe it would benefit him if we told him about his parents, Danzo said. Hiruzen nearly jumped out of his seat. The knowledge of Naruto's relation to Minato and Kushina was so secret it didn't even have a rank. The Hokage figured that Danzo already pieced it all together, but there was no reasonable explanation as to why he thought it was a good idea to tell the boy his heritage. Hiruzen huffed out a large cloud of smoke harshly. Danzo, we can't. That knowledge is dangerous. If Minato's enemies found out he had a son, but was cut off by the elder, if that were the case, then they would have found out by now and made an attempt to kill the boy. For Kami's sake, he looks just like his father. And another thing, what were you thinking giving him Kushina's clan name? The Uzumaki were attacked and hunted down for a reason. What would have happened if someone recognized the name? If anything, he is more at risk of being recognized as an Uzumaki than a Namikaze, Danzo stated. At that moment, as Danzo's logic registered, the aging Hokage nearly had a stroke. How could he have not realized that? Most folk only knew Minato as just the Yellow Flash, or Yondaime. If Hiruzen had named the child Naruto Namikaze, no one would have noticed. Not even in Konoha. Hiruzen had to make a lot of decisions when Naruto was a baby. The best he could do was follow his late wife's example with their own children and the advice of his most trusted medic. If only Bawako was alive at the time, she would have known what to do. But that's beside the point. All of Minato's and Kushina's enemies are either dead or lost interest after they died. Hiruzen thought for a moment. He couldn't argue against that. There was hundreds of tales of vengeful ninja, but the truth was those were only a few hundred out of a few billion of ninja that lived their lives every day. People just loved a good story more. Violence and drama unfortunately made excellent stories. However, there was two that he could think of who still definitely held a grudge even now. I assure you, Danzo, Onoki and A would love to get their hands on the son of the Yellow Flash and the Red Death. Onoki will want some kind of petty revenge for the bruises to his ego he still carries. And will want to take him for whatever power he thinks he can gain from Naruto, if not that, then certainly to take the fox. Danzo shook his head. He may be trying to turn over a new leaf in the face of his imminent end, but he still mostly kept the same beliefs. The one belief was that a ninja were often too cautious and emotional, they would miss opportunities or allow situations to escalate needlessly. Hiruzen was more of a student to Hashirama than Tobirama. The first Hokage was a man of admirable contentment while the second tended to be admittedly paranoid, but nonetheless the Shodai's non-confrontational views blinded him to the threat that was Madara Uchiha. Danzo sat back down and sighed. He knew Hiruzen was right, but had to convince his friend. I'm well aware of that old dirt flea's belligerence, but he is in no position to risk another war over just one child. Danzo said. The Hokage stroked his short beard, nodding, yes. As I understand, the new daimyo of the Land of Earth, Lady Tsuchime I believe is her name, is not as approving of his decisions as her father, he said. Onoki has made it difficult for anyone to travel to the Land of Earth, having continually increasing security on their border, or so I have heard. Danzo nodded back and replied, to the point that he has nearly, if it isn't already, crippled the national economy by harassing traders from other countries. Lady Tsuchime has been trying to get him to back down. She wants the past to be forgotten, and to rule in a more diplomatic manner than her predecessors so that her country can thrive with new allies. He had one more thing, and as I hear, she is not happy with how her father's assassination was handled and is aware of the rumors that the Stone Council might have actually been responsible. As of yet she has not cut ties with Stone, but she doesn't trust Iwagakure anymore to say the least. Hiruzen nodded. It was a frightening possibility that a ninja village could fall out of favor with its home country. Not even the 5 great villages were safe. For example, Grass Country had officially denounced their own village after a meager 20 years since its founding. Kusagakure had been only an attempt to make a name for the Land of Grass and was completely under the daimyo's control with only a jonin as the figurehead. But the Grass Ninja had been getting greedy and accepting missions from the criminal underworld. The Grass Daimyo couldn't allow his country's reputation to be tarnished, and so he cut all ties with the hidden Grass Village, making them enemy hostiles in their own country. And now they were nothing short of brigands accepting work worthy of a cutthroat mercenary or yakuza. The only thing that kept them in somewhat legitimate standing was the infamous blood prison. That was why every Hokage since Tobirama had the Clan Lord Council, the elected civilians that represented the general population, the Anbu and Jonin commanders, the department heads, and finally those who had been given the official title of Elder by the sitting Kage. All were to act as advisors for the Hokage and help him make decisions. But in recent years the civilians had been getting too much power. Now that 5 clan seats were empty, the Hokage had more or less become their whipping boy. Hopefully with Danzo now more amicable he can get little more of his power back. You are thinking about the council, aren't you? Danzo said. Hiruzen looked up and chuckled. Am I that obvious? He said, and Danzo smiled back. You always let off the smallest amount killing intent when you do, especially when you think about the civilians. I assure you, my friend, with the short time I have left I will endeavor to rectify this. Hiruzen shook his head in amusement. We're getting off topic. While I concede on your point for Iwa, what about Kumo? The wise man asked. His friend looked at him and simply said, you know exactly why I won't risk going to war and risk harming this village, and those in it. The Hokage looked at the elder somewhat shocked. How much do you know? He asked seriously. Danzo looked at Hiruzen with an even stare, not threatening, but certainly disapproving. I know who she is, how she was able to get here safely, as well as UNA's agreement so that she and her family are left in peace. He saw the panicked look on his friend's face. Don't worry, I won't tell Mabui, or the Hyuga, but you can't hide it forever, Hiruzen. That is one sin you did completely on your own without my help. As I have come to believe recently, we all will meet our judgment in the end. Hiruzen Sarutobi looked down in sadness and shame. After all the tragedy of the Kyuubi getting loose, he had to let in that poor teen girl that had shown up at his gates heavy with child, regardless of the consequences. He just had to do it. Danzo watched his friend with equal shame. At the time he was still his old self and the fox's rampage had only made it worse, so he was of course against the reinstated Hokage allowing asylum to a rogue Cloud Kunoichi. He didn't care that she was pregnant, he thought he could just hold her captive like so many other women before, threatening her child for cooperation. Once the child was born, he would have had her killed and taken her daughter for his root. He thought of the girl he had been training for the last 5 years, what he made her do to the only person she saw as family, how he raised a child that so much looked like the wife he had lost, and the daughter he pushed her to marry the man who would be her killer. Was this punishment from Kami? Maybe I am religious, there is so much I have to repent for, the former war hawk thought. The Hokage looked at his friend calmly, a small amount of grief still in his eyes, thinking of his own beloved Bawako and how ashamed she would be of him. It seemed Hiruzen couldn't argue anymore and had to admit the truth, mostly to himself. I've wanted to tell Naruto, really I have, for so long. But I just couldn't do it. Every time he asked, excuses would just fly out of my mouth, it's just, every time the subject came up, I became terrified. You know how Naruto is, if he found out he would just brag for attention, and if the villagers heard that the demon was claiming to be the son of their hero, that would only make his situation worse. Not to mention, as I said before, you never know who's listening, Hiruzen said. But really, what I feared the most is that if he knew who his father was, with how this village treats him, it would only breed resentment. To the people here, and me. The Hokage sighed as the truth finally came out. Yeah, I was scared he would hate me. When did you plan to tell him exactly? About everything, Danzo asked in curiosity. The boy's parent was a bit tricky, he had to agree, but he never understood why Naruto was never told of his burden. Pretty much all Jinchuriki knew from the beginning of what they are and the responsibility they had. It just didn't make sense to give someone a paper bomb and not tell them what it was and why they had it. Now was it? I had planned to tell him when he was more grown up, like 18, or if he had gone up in the ranks well enough and made Jonin or maybe Chunin, the Hokage replied. The old war hawk looked at his equally old friend. Danzo had a particular face on, the kind of face that said, "You are a dumbass." Hiruzen sulked a little under his gaze and asked, "What?" In response, "What he says," Danzo said, rolling his visible eye, and looked at his old friend in disappointment. "Hiruzen, I'm trying to change here and give your way of thinking a shot before I die, but that right there has to be the most stupid thing I have ever heard from your mouth to date. You can't be serious. Even I understand the amount of damage waiting that long could do to the young man emotionally. He really should have been told about his burden the day he started the academy. You can't really think you can go that long and not tell him he basically has a ticking time bomb tattooed to his stomach. We both inspected that seal with Jiraiya and we all know it is meant to help him absorb the fox's chakra better than Lady Mito or Kushina ever did. What would happen if he had finally tapped into it without knowing? Oh wait, he already did just few hours ago and killed a man. Mizuki was no loss, but we got lucky that he was able to calm down. We both know what happens when a Jinchuriki is not in control. That berserk human sandstorm Rasa made himself is a good example, and don't give me that shit you were trying to protect him. The only person you were protecting was yourself. I mean, the boy adores you. If you had just explained to him about his parents and the Kyuubi, I believe he would not only keep his mouth shut but benefit from the knowledge. And that is why I am here tonight. I have a plan that could not only spare Naruto any more grief but give him the needed drive to be the Hokage his father was. No. Even more. Danzo ended his rant. He had to catch his breath as his illness showing again. Hiruzen looked at his old friend like the man had just pissed on his desk. Geez Danzo, tell me how you really feel, he finally said, pouting like a child. Well, Minato was a fine candidate for successor. I'll admit I was wrong about your former student, but you should have found a replacement a long time ago. Look at you, you're as much on death's door as I am, you shriveled up old monkey. Danzo jabbed one last time, which earned an angry tick mark and twitchy eyebrow from said monkey. Thank you, Hiruzen said dryly, and Danzo smirked in victory. Hiruzen sighed and thought about what his friend said. There was no doubt, the man was right. The thing was, he was always right. He may suggest things that were not the Sarutobi's style, but that didn't mean his opinions and insights were wrong. That's why Hiruzen never locked the man up for ordering Itachi to purge his own clan behind his back. Fine. You want me to say I up? Well, I up. Okay. If you really think that you have a better idea, then let's do it. Hiruzen gave in. It felt a little too easily, but Danzo for the first time in his life showed a great amount of trust and honesty, so the Hokage owed his old comrade the benefit of the doubt at the very least. Danzo curtly nodded, satisfied. Who knew that being a nice guy got you what you wanted? Good, but I think we are missing a few people. He got up and walked to the door and opened it quickly. A body fell on the ground. Gah! The purple-haired woman yelped, landing flat on her face. It was Anko, who had been trying to listen through the door. Ow! She grumbled, rubbing her nose. Sweetheart, are you all right? An overly worried Iruka asked his girlfriend as he helped her up. She's fine. If it wasn't her face, it would have been her ass, the Hokage's secretary chuckled, earning a glare from her best friend. Anko looked to her boyfriend with a loving, pretty smile. I'm fine, honey, she said, giving him a short kiss, making the man blush. Anko then returned her glare to Mabui. No thanks to some people. Mabui decided to play a game, one her husband in particular loved playing with his own best friend. She had made a show of checking her nails, still flawless, and looked to the other kunoichi as if she just realized she was there. What was that, dear? She innocently asked with a bored look. Anko gasped dramatically and pointed an accusatory finger to the dark-skinned woman. Oh, you did not just try to pull that shit on me. There was a bit of chuckling at the door. Now Anko, my lovely wife was only playing, no need to be offended. Everyone looked to see a tall man. He wore a standard Jonin uniform with armored fingerless gloves. His most striking features was his sliver spiky hair, cloth mask, and most notably how his Hittite was tilted over his left eye. This man was famous. He went by many names. Copycat Ninja, hero of the Sharingan, friend killer, but to one woman in the office he was the father of her child and her lover. He was Kakashi Hatake. The former Cloud Kunoichi smiled when she saw her husband. She had really missed him during their separation. She then remembered what Danzo said to her. Kakashi came up to his wife, smiling at her with his eye like he always did. Yo. Mabui Tenshi. He greeted, calling her angel like he always had since the night they met. He was acting playful. Some would think he was being insincere, but Mabui knew her husband better than anyone and could hear the love in his voice that never died and never will. Mabui steeled her resolve. No more of this. She smiled at her husband and went right up to him. Kakashi looked a bit startled, wondering if she was gonna hit him. In his mind he was no good and didn't deserve his wife and daughter. To him he believed his angel hated him. Every day for the last 4 years he just sulked waiting for his wife to serve him divorce papers. Their marriage was not awful. They just argued maybe a little too much. He would push her buttons a little too far and she would scream a little too much. No marriage was perfect. And you couldn't fault one built on teen pregnancy for being tense, yet their daughter didn't deserve to be around that. But it came to a head when he majorly screwed up, which resulted in a particular heated back and forth. When his peaceful child returned the day of her first graduation, how disappointed he was in her, the things he said to her. His wife didn't like what he said, even though he had been saying it all his life and their marriage. It didn't matter, it all just proved he was the worst. He was just too broken to be the man his family needed, at least that was what Kakashi thought. Mabui, he started to say depressively but was stopped when his wife shushed him, placing a finger on his masked lips. To his shock and that of all present, she pulled down his mask and backup mask and kissed him for all she was worth. Kakashi was helpless as his lips were assaulted by his beautiful wife, her lips glossed with her favorite rose petal lip balm so soft and plush. She held him firm from escaping with her arms wrapped around his neck. There was nothing he could do, and it had been so long since he kissed the love of his life properly, so he closed his eye and wrapped his arms around her, surrendering to his angel once again. When Mabui was done, she pulled away to look at his handsome face and almost giggled at how dazed he looked. Kakashi, my love, please come home, she pleaded. The man looked at her and went to that infuriating lazy look he did when he didn't want to deal with something. He sighed and shook. You were right to kick me out, I was, but his wife stopped him in his tracks when she shouted, stop it. The man winced at her tone and she calmed her anger but kept her gaze on him firm, letting Kakashi know that his wife wanted him to be quiet and smartly did just that. Kakashi, I know you still hate yourself for what you said to Ayako. Mabui actually sniffed, trying not to cry. Despite freeing herself from Kumo, she still found it hard to cry openly. Kakashi stayed quiet, letting her talk. It was all he could do for her, for the strength she's given him. But she loves you and has never held it against you, she said. The woman's green eyes became somber with guilt. I'm not one to throw stones either. I didn't want her to go through what I did in Kumo, but I'm also scared of what can happen, whom she might run into out there. Mabui looked down, trying not think about if her daughter ever ran into a cloud ninja in the field. Or worse, her grandfather. Kakashi looked at his wife with a small, crooked smile. Now who is hating themselves? Tenshi, she loves you more than anything. I know she understands. She's always been so smart and mature for her age. I'm sure she understands. She's her mother's daughter after all. Mabui smiled and pecked his lips again. And you are her hero, and she still only wants nothing more than to be just like you. She doesn't need you to keep your distance, she needs you. She needs her father. Honestly, I'm at my wit's end with that girl and I need help. And, I need you too. I'm tired of waking up in the morning and you're not there by my side. I hate coming home and you're not there to hold me and call me angel. She looked discreetly to their audience and got close to his ear and whispered, and I'm just gonna be blunt. I don't know about you, but I can't do it alone anymore. It was never good in the first place and it's not going to get any better, not without you. Kakashi blushed hard at her confession, also looking discreetly. Enko of course had a big Cheshire grin that was a little too knowing. But his wife was right. He needed to feel his wife's warmth again, even his favorite books was becoming tedious. However, something she said caught him. What happened to Ayako-chan? What's wrong? He asked with fatherly concern. Mabui sighed. I'm not entirely sure really. She won't talk to me like she used to, all she does is train. She's so standoffish, always with a chip on her shoulder. She has no friends. Well, maybe that girl from the florist and the Hyuga girl, but she isn't letting anyone near her. I know we taught her to be self-reliant and confidant, but it's like she walks around the village with a back off sign around her neck. And she's a very strong kunoichi, but she has no team. Everyone I try to find her just ends in disaster. Recently she just refuses to join on principle that she is better off without a squad. Kakashi, she has re-graduated twice. She keeps passing with flying colors at the academy only to end up right back. The last time she actually tried to sacrifice her teammate to win the test, the boys were in the hospital covered in lashes. The woman sighed. Kakashi groaned, not liking what he was hearing. It was worse than he feared. The girl apparently had no value in camaraderie and was all about her career. He knew he shouldn't fly off the handle the first time, but he just wanted her to value friendship and teamwork, but it appeared that it only had the opposite effect. It reminded him of someone. Gods, she just like me when I was her age by the sound of it, he said, pinching the bridge of his nose. I was by the book and arrogant, some of it was my father, some from being all that prodigy nonsense, he trailed off. Mabui looked apprehensive and Kakashi noticed. What? He asked fearfully. Ayako-chan is a prodigy too. She should have graduated early like you, but with her antisocial behavior keeping her away from anyone and never joining a team. Kakashi sighed. His daughter always reminded him of his wife, but she was also really too much like him in some ways. He was about to pull his mask up, but then instead he smiled and kissed his wife again, short and sweet but filled with all his love, and maybe a little tongue. He looked at his wife as she smiled at him, a bit dazed herself. All right, I'll come home. Pakun and the others are kinda getting sick of being cramped up in that studio anyway, he chuckled. Mabui giggled. Poor babies. She then got a scary sweet smile, but the rule still stands. They do anything to my nice clean house. I swear to the gods, if there's so much as a spittle of drool on my good couch, we are building a kennel and they are sleeping outside and you with them. Are we clear? She said, still smiling but also releasing killing intent. Kakashi gulped. Yes dear, Crystal, I'll tell them. Good. Danzo cleared his throat, gaining everyone's attention. He was standing in his usual spot next his Hokage, acting in his capacity as elder and advisor. Not typical was the little upturn of the corner of his mouth. It's good to see that you took my advice, Mrs. Hitaki, but that is not the reason why I called Kakashi-san. We have matters to discuss concerning young Naruto and what to do from here. Kakashi, not as aware of the elder's desire to change as the others, he only knew the Danzo that tried to manipulate him using his young family, extorting him to assassinate the very Hokage the War Hawk was standing next to. So, Kakashi was still suspicious of Danzo and was about to start making something of it, but his wife whispered into his ear and he relaxed. The Hokage decided to get the discussion going. Please, everyone have a seat, he spoke with authority. Anko, I'm sure Iruka-san is still sore from his wounds. Why don't you two take the couch so he can lie down? Mabui offered as she was already getting the chairs positioned so her and her husband can discuss comfortably with all present. Anko and Iruka nodded in thanks. Anko sat first and placed Iruka's head in her lap. Babe. You want me to do something about the pain? I can summon Kani-chan for you. She asked. Iruka nodded and Anko summoned one of her snakes. A beautiful green snake only 2 feet long appeared and looked to her mistress. How may I help, mistress? She hissed. Iruka-kun is hurt. He needs some of your venom, she ordered. Venom? Kakashi asked. Kani is a medic snake. She can manipulate the chemistry of her venom for pharmaceutical purposes. She can make nearly anything and has a mastery of the apothecial arts, Anko informed, making green snake's head a touch rosy looking. Mabui spoke up. You've met her, dear. She helped Aya-chan when she broke her arm that time, Mabui reminded her husband. Kakashi nodded, remembering the time his daughter tried to tree walk before she was ready. She was imitating him after he got her frisbee out of a tree. Kani bit in her painkiller and then wrapped around his little girl's arm, setting the bone back into place and acting as a splint until Aya could get a proper cast. From what Kakashi remembered, the snake had very good bedside manner and was amazing with children. It's good to meet you again, Kani-chan, Kakashi said, smiling as he does. The green serpent smiled the same as Kakashi, as she didn't exactly have lips. It truly was my pleasure, she replied, and then got to work. The green snake bit Iruka, and after the initial bite he immediately looked much better, his face relaxing. This is a low dose, but it will last through the night, so you will be able to get some sleep. Please be a good patient, sir, and get some rest. The snake looked at her mistress accusatorially, and that means he does not do anything too physical for at least a week so he can properly heal, lest his wounds open up again. Only bed rest, meaning sleep and nothing else, Kani informed firmly, knowing her mistress well. Anko huffed. Why is everyone looking at me? She then noticed that everyone was literally looking at her. Sweetheart, Iruka said. Anko threw her hands in the air. Fine. Resting only. Geez, honestly, you make me look like I'm some fiend, she defended, yet also thinking, damn. A few weeks alone at home and I get twat blocked. Kani nodded satisfied and poofed home. So, now that everyone is settled, the Hokage said, looking around, internally pleased with the sight of young couples so close. Anko was giving Iruka tender affection and Mabui was hugging Kakashi's arm, her head his shoulder. Asuma better get his ass in gear. Kurenai is a good woman, elder father thought, briefly missing his wife Bawako. We must now discuss what to do about Naruto. Me and Iruka agreed that with him learning the shadow clone jutsu that he is more than qualified to graduate retroactively, but that will take some convincing the council, as we have already posted this year's graduates, Hiruzen stated. Danzo shook his head. I'm not saying that I disagree with that sentiment. That technique is a kinjutsu for a reason, and for him to make so many. Even the civilians are not so stupid to not see that, to put it like this. With that jutsu, Naruto-san is a literal one-man army. From their perspective he would be very lucrative on solo bounty missions. Everyone nodded, agreeing. Bounty missions could take months but potentially made a lot of money that the village got a hefty cut from, so one ninja going solo was preferred, as having a whole team gone that long might be a waste of manpower. Plus, the ninja in question can always request backup if needed. Danzo continued. Either way, I would advise you to come up with a contingency in case that excuse is shot down, which I predict it will be. Tonight is more than enough for the civilians to make a move against the boy. Everyone nodded, agreeing again. Kakashi spoke up. I'm still in the dark as to what happened tonight. So the full story was told again. Everyone add their own piece, even Anko and Mabui. By the end of it Kakashi could only whistle lowly. Damn, well that is a shit show. This earned him a smack on the back of the head from his wife for being so unprofessional. What I meant to say, he corrected, rubbing his head, is that Naruto is already on their short list. Even those who don't hate him were expecting more from the village Jinchuriki. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I would have to agree with Danzo. I would go as far as saying that you should just drop the retroactive angle altogether. Yeah, Anko chimed in. It needs to look like Naruto is not getting special treatment while at the same time giving him what he needs. Hiruzen thought for a moment, puffing on his pipe. He then nodded. Given your arguments, I am now thinking I would have to agree. Sorry, Iruka. It was a good try. And the Chunin teacher nodded, also agreeing that his idea may have been too hopeful. As he laid on his girlfriend, Iruka asked, then what do we do then? We've already told Naruto that he is a ninja. At this Danzo spoke up. I already have an idea. If they can't accept him being expedited because his status is the village's Jinchuriki and its greatest weapon. Then Danzo went into his well-crafted explanation. It was a bit elaborate, much like most if Danzo's schemes indeed. Yet, it was hard to argue against it. That could work. I'm not thrilled about the angle, but it certainly wouldn't turn any heads, Iruka commented, but it needs to be more than that. We need a solid reason why he has to be in the next set of teams, and even then, he still has to pass the teamwork test. Me and Anko have an idea on how we can do that, Mabui said. Anko grinned. That we do, she said. The two women explained their machinations and everyone was surprised. It was genius, it was out of the box, and will turn the whole village on its head. It also helped when Iruka reminded everyone what his role was at the academy, more specifically what his classroom was for. The adults continued talking. When it came to discuss Danzo's plan to tell Naruto his parentage, Anko and Iruka were flabbergasted. Anko was of course pissed that she was not let into the loop about Naruto being the son of the only woman who had ever shown her kindness since she was abandoned by Orochimaru. Literally her only ever mother figure. And Kakashi was also not very keen on the idea as Hiruzen was. He didn't think Naruto was ready to know, but like always his wife convinced him that continuing to lie to the blonde would do more harm than good. And so, everyone was in agreement. Whether Naruto was ready or not, the boy had to be shown little more trust given all he's been through. Alright, we have a plan. Tomorrow at the council meeting to announce the teams we'll enact it. Hopefully come Monday we have a team for Naruto, the Sandaime said satisfied. So with everything said and done they had a plan, now they had to tell Naruto the truth.